Now, what's different about Trump, and just very briefly, is that Trump, I think, approaches foreign policy in a very transactional way. So Trump has no illusions about the United States being this millenarian power who's going to remake the world in a good way. And I think that's what was appealing, about his message to not only his base, but to many critics of American foreign policy, is that Trump is very much not an American exceptionalist. He thinks America is just a nation like any other nation, and like any other nation, it should try to do whatever, it should try to fuck over the world for its own interests. So it's a very transactional approach.
I mean, that was the thing, right? Like, we've talked about this example of, like, when he said to Bill O'Reilly, like, oh, what, you think we're so innocent? And it's one hand, it's like, that's amazing to finally watch, an American politician acknowledge that obviously we don't act from a moral standpoint in our foreign policy. But then conversely, it's like, when Noam Chomsky says it, he means like we shouldn't be like that. Not like,
yeah. It sounds like we should just stop pretending we're better and should just do it, but better.
Right, exactly.
It's a totally different moral universe.
Totally different moral universe. So, and that loops back to the opening commentary, right? Like, because, I was talking about this. Everybody should be concerned by this Mike Pompeo commission on inalienable rights, obviously. I mean, I think the prime focus of that one is obviously very specifically a targeting of the LGBTQ community and a targeting of women specifically with regards to abortion. Obviously, these are people, I mean, just even alone in terms of their active and aggressive support of the genocide in Yemen. And I absolutely use that word, very consciously now. I think it really is a genocidal campaign that we've supported every step of the way.
Absolutely.
So, this is like this is the thing, and I think this is the argument of the time in every area, domestic and foreign. I do think that even if we limp along with just a sort of generic Democrat that defeats Trump, I still think that this system is done. We're not getting back there. I mean, you could see it in the micro examples of Macron and Trudeau, right? We're not returning to this. There is this horrible right-wing authoritarian ascendancy. So what is a post-empire foreign policy? Like, what does it actually look like to deal with this? Yeah.
So what I would say is that a post-empire foreign policy would be the longest term way of thinking about it. I think if we're talking about today and tomorrow, and should a President Bernie or whoever wins Kamala Harris, I think we're going to be in a transitional moment, at least for the next presidential administration. So we have to think, how are we going to create the conditions to even get to a post-empire foreign policy? Just like Rome wasn't built in a day, it also wasn't destroyed in a day, right? It's a long, long process through which these imperial structures are actually dismantled. So I think what we should be doing now, or let's say whoever Bernie's foreign policy advisors are, or whatever the new Quincy Institute, the anti-militarist think tank, does, I think they really need to start thinking about the type of new institutional architecture that is going to, one, dismantle empire, and two, prevent the United States from doing it again in the future by creating at least some sort of legislative capacity to rein in the imperial presidency. And as it suggests, I think the first thing we need to do is totally reform the office of the presidency. I don't think people fully appreciate how concentrated foreign policy authority is in the White House. And so the only way we're going to get in post-imperial foreign policy is if we get first a post-imperial presidency, by literally restricting what the executive is able to do. And this doesn't just relate to foreign policy in terms of abroad, but it also relates to associated areas like immigration, right? There's a lot of discussion, particularly amongst the left, of all the domestic things that a President Bernie would do. But ironically, Bernie is going to have most of his authority, barring executive orders, which he could basically do whatever he wants. But if he doesn't want to do executive orders and put things on a firmer basis, his major authority is actually in foreign policy making. So what Bernie could do is actually personally restrict the capacities of the office of the presidency to do everything that it is able to do. And I think once we start doing that, then we could start thinking about, just for example, closing some of the 800 bases, getting rid of some of those aircraft carriers, getting very low on nuclear weapons, engaging in mutual disarmament treaties, stop fucking arming the world with American weapons, things like that. So I think that is the first stage, this transitional period, is the focus of immediate concern. And then once we do that, we'll be able to think about, so the United States is still an incredibly powerful nation. What can we do in post-imperial foreign policy? And for me, that is creating a union. The first step is creating a union of North America between Mexico, Canada, and the United States that isn't defined by the hierarchies that traditionally separate the global North from the global South. That could be a first true post-imperial foreign policy, and also, as it suggests, post-national foreign policy, because we need to start thinking beyond the confines of the nation state if we want to start truly thinking beyond the confines of empire.
And could a focus point of that, I mean, there's some point that this needs to be leveraged into, I mean, really obviously dealing with the ecological crisis. I mean, it has to be something, it has to be, right?
Right. Some global
disarmament and ecology. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, how do you create an international infrastructure that is, one, democratic? Because what we've seen is that these anti-democratic structures like the EU only last so long before there's some sort of public rebellion. But two, how do you create it in a meaningful way where you're able to come to the table with China and India and Russia, where they're very concerned about development? You know, the left hasn't talked about development in the United States because it's not really been an issue for Americans for a long time. But these countries, India and China in particular, are very concerned about industrial development and post-industrial development. So how do you make concessions, redistribute resources in such a way where these countries are able to, quote unquote, develop in the way that they want without totally destroying the environment? And the only way you're going to do that is by voluntarily giving up American hegemony. So, for example, the United States needs to get the hell out of East Asia. Right, this ring of bases that surrounds China, from South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, etc. We need to get out of there if we're ever going to be able to deal with China in a way that's going to be able to manage the global good of the climate or the global inequality problem. Right, so we need to do these things almost immediately. And it's a very tall order because we still have these material structures that define the world.
You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.